we're moving to Old Trafford, and I want to get the update from Rob. We thought by this stage that the investment, the 25% stake in Manchester United going to Jim Ratcliffe would have been finalised, but not yet. It's done, but not announced. Is that where we are?
Yeah, pretty much. We were told that it would probably be announced over the international break. Obviously, it's a break in Premier League fixtures, so it's an ideal time to kind of announce that sort of thing. Inos certainly and Jim Ratcliffe were pushing for an announcement during the international break. That probably won't happen now, particularly because it's with Thanksgiving in the US on Thursday. There's going to be a little break with activity over there. So we're looking more likely now at next week. Obviously, it's a little bit more complicated next week in that the games are back and United are in the Champions League. They're away at Galatasaray, so the timing would have to fit in with that. They don't want this to be a huge distraction. But we're certainly looking now at next week for an announcement.
Ali, if you're paying around 1.3 billion for a 25% stake in a company, you can look at it two ways. One, you've got a quarter of the company, and two, you don't own 3/4 of the company. What do you think Jim Ratcliffe and Inos would be looking for this investment when it comes to the say that they will have in the running of the football club?
I believe is a foot in the door, a very big foot in the door, but a foot in the door nonetheless. And I imagine, and I don't know this, I don't have any inside information, but I imagine that is the start of what may be next, of what may be to come, and a potential full transition in the future. How that works out, I'm not quite certain, but it feels like if you're going to make this sort of investment, because you feel a connection to the project. You feel a connection to the excitement of what this may bring to you as a company and what it may bring to the club and the fans as a whole. And quite frankly, I think for the fans, what this is perhaps a sign that the change is coming. And it's a positive sign and perhaps a reason to hope and to believe that indeed there are better times ahead for Manchester United, and that whatever the involvement is of Jim Ratcliffe, that at the very least you're seeing a perspective that gives you hope and gives you reasons to think we are heading in the right direction. Now, we don't know that for certain. Like I said, this is just perception from the fans in that they're looking for a change. Here's a change. It's not a major change per se, because as you just said, 3/4 of the club are owned by somebody else. But at the very least, it's a foot in the door and perhaps a sign for things to come in the future.
Rob, we've spoken a lot about this. Let's try and take it forward a little bit. To get a majority stake in Manchester United, with 25%, you would need another 26% to take you over the 50% barrier. Yes, it's something I'm sure Jim Ratcliffe will find easier to do when he's in. But if he is successful, which they're hoping he is with Manchester United, and they're successful, what we got right now, $33 per share. So it would cost him more to get to where he needs to be. Is there a kind of short, medium, long-term aim for Ratcliffe to get more stakeholding in the football club and eventually Manchester United can say farewell to the Glazers?
That's certainly the plan. Ali's right in that Jim Ratcliffe has got a foot in the door, and there's a difference between the bid that he put together as opposed to the one that the Qatari consortium put together. The Qatari consortium wanted to buy 100% of the club. They designed their bid to win over the fans, and it did. But Ratcliffe was quite clever in that his bid was designed to win over the Glazers. And ultimately, it's a Glazers' opinion that matters. And that's why we've got a situation where it'll be Jim Ratcliffe coming in with his 25% stake, and the Qataris are nowhere to be seen. Jim Ratcliffe will hope that in the future this leads to him becoming the majority owner. But again, it goes back to that same question. Do the Glazers want to give up their control? United fans will know that a year ago today, they released that statement during the World Cup to say that they would look at alternatives, and that could be investment or it could be a full sale. Now, the fans all saw those two words, full sale, and thought the Glazers are gone. This is fantastic. This is exactly what we've been hoping for. I doubt very much, knowing what I do now, that the Glazers ever really intended to sell. And that's why we're in a situation a year on with Jim Ratcliffe coming in as very much a minority stakeholder. Again, Jim Ratcliffe will hope that further down the line that he will become the majority owner. there's no timeline for that though. So at the moment, it's all in the Glazers' hands. And you're right in what you say that at the moment, the deal that Radcliffe's agreed for the 25% stake is around about $33 a share. If Radcliffe comes in and is successful, and United is successful, and he invests in the stadium, and that becomes a world-class facility again, the squad become a squad that are winning Premier League titles and the Champions League again, then obviously the value of the club goes up. And that means that the price he has to pay for the next little bit goes up. So do the Glazers want to sell at that point? Well, again, we've nothing to suggest in the last year that they want to give up that control. So, it's all very well Ratcliffe saying that this is the first step to him owning everything. We don't know that. The Glazers are still in control.
You said during that answer, if I knew then what I know now. What do you know now that you didn't know 12 months ago?
Well, we were surprised when the statement came. A year ago, we were all at World Cup. We were in Qatar. We were very surprised that the statement came. Again, though, because we've never seen anything like that with the Glazers in 18 years of ownership. So everyone latched onto those two words, that full sale. And the fans did it. I think journalists did. The media did. They thought for the first time in nearly 20 years that the Glazers were talking about selling the club. Why else would you include those words in a statement if you weren't thinking of selling? Well, it became apparent quite quickly that that's not what this was about. It was about finding minority investment. They've had a very, very good offer for a full takeover on the table from the Qatari consortium, an offer of around about 5 billion, which is way over market value for Manchester United. I think it's valued around about 3 billion on the stock, according to their share price. So that tells you the markup that the Qataris were willing to pay, and they've not accepted it. The offer they've accepted is for a 25% investment. And I don't think that the Glazers ever really intended to sell. I think this was all about, seeing what people valued United at, finding that minority investment, and somehow finding the money to continue as majority owners. And right now, that's exactly what they've done.
Quotes from Sir Alex Ferguson about this topic over the last 24 hours. He said, "I know Jim well. We shall have to see what he does, but I am optimistic." We're going to get Ali's take in a second on Inos and Jim Ratcliffe's other sporting interests that he's had, but he does have a controlling stake in Nice in Ligue 1 in France. And our very own Julien Laurent, with a recorded piece from ESPN FC, explains how his investment has been in France and what he's done.
Sir Jim Ratcliffe bought Nice in the summer 2019, and since then it's been a very interesting tenure for him. Not much success on the pitch, although when he arrived he said that within 3 years he wanted to compete for the Liga title with PSG. Not quite yet. They finished 6th, they finished 9th, they finished 5th, and they finished 9th again in the 4 full seasons that he's been in charge. He spent a lot of money, 260 million euros to buy loads of players, 50 since he took over. A lot of them also left the club. Not bringing as much money, of course, but the investment has been there, even for the training ground, which has been refurbished and modernized. So there was a willingness to do well, clearly, with some big ambition. The problem maybe lays where in the manager, in the sense that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and some of the calls that he made in terms of manager were maybe not good enough. Patrick Vieira lasted 18 months. He's the longest manager under Sir Jim Ratcliffe at Nice before he was sacked. Lucien Favre was just 6 months. You had interim managers. Digard, Urcea, who didn't last long either. Christophe Galtier was only here for 1 year. He left to go to PSG, but he would have been let go anywhere because of some tensions within the club. And now we've got Francesco Farioli, who's doing an amazing job, has only been really at the club since the summer. He made some mistakes, of course, like appointing his own brother, Bob, as the Nice CEO, only for 2 years because he was clearly not good enough for it. Then Sir Dave Brailsford, the former Sky cycling guru, was also heavily involved at Nice. Not really for the best, because under him they made their worst signings since Sir Jim Ratcliffe took over the club. So some positives, some negatives as well. And I think we get an idea already of what we can expect from Ratcliffe at United. Investment, money spent on the training ground, on the stadium, Old Trafford, the Carrington, for sure. On the squad, for sure. He lacks a squad overhaul. But really himself, I don't think we'll see him being involved a lot. He will delegate massively, which is also what he does in his professional life.
Interesting stuff there from Jules. Look, he's a very successful businessman with Ineos, the CEO there, but one or two decisions with some of the sporting interests that he's had. Jules mentioned Sky Cycling, the All Blacks. We've also had the America's Cup. He's been involved in Lausanne. As far as going forward is concerned, Ali, what can he change quickly, and what does he need to change most once he gets his foot in the door?
I'll tell you what's interesting. And hearing Jules talk, the more he kept talking, the more I felt like, wait a second, is he talking about Nice or is he talking about Manchester United currently? That's what it felt like. Yeah, a lot of money thrown at the problem, but a lot of money thrown at the wrong players, at the wrong managers, and decisions that kind of keep repeating themselves and mistakes that keep repeating themselves. Isn't that the issue currently at Manchester United and has been the issue for Manchester United for the last few years? That is something that needs to be different and that needs to change. And so as Jim Ratcliffe comes in, what's critical and has to be critical from here on out is who's making the player personnel decisions. And indeed, what is the infrastructure of this club in terms of decision making? Where is the identification of talent? And what are the objectives that need to happen on the field? And who are the players that indeed can take you to those objectives? That plan has to be clear. And those that are making those decisions have to be people that cannot get it wrong. They're to the point now, Manchester United, and now with this new influx of money, they cannot get it wrong. They have to get these decisions right. And the first decision that needs to be made, I believe, is in the infrastructure of the club and the decision-making infrastructure of the organization as a whole. Once they do that, then you can start identifying talent, you can start identifying players, go after the players, and then you can throw money at the issue, but not just throw money at it and see what sticks. There has to be an organized plan in order to be able to have Manchester United not only be successful in the short term, but in the long term as well.
We'll wrap up this topic shortly, Rob. What does 25% of Manchester United buy you when it comes to a say in recruitment, which over the past few years has not been good enough at Old Trafford?
Well, and that's the interesting thing about this whole deal, that 25% of a company would usually get you nothing. It would usually essentially mean that you're a silent partner. The deal that we think that Ratcliffe has negotiated is to have quite a big say over the football side of the business. So that would be anything from player recruitment to who the manager is, to the infrastructure that Ali's just mentioned there, that the way that players are bought and sold. And really, that's what fans will look to him to have an impact on, because really Man United's recruitment over the last 10 years has been absolutely appalling. They've fallen well behind the top clubs in Europe. They've spent a similar amount of money over the last 10 years to City, but have had nothing like their success. The problem that most Man United fans will have with this is that when Ratcliffe's come in, he's brought in Dave Brailsford, who Jules mentioned in his piece. He transformed British cycling, but he is, as director of sport at Ineos, hasn't had a great deal of success outside of cycling. So is he the right guy to come in and start making these decisions about who helps United recruit players? Ultimately, the proof will be in the pudding with that. If he signs the right players, if he gets those processes working, United will be stronger on the field. If they don't, they could be in the same position that we're talking about now, just a poor squad who aren't equipped to win the Premier League title or the Champions League. The other interesting point in all this is Erik ten Hag. He has got a lot of credit in the bank with Man United fans and apparently with Ratcliffe for what he did at Man United last season. But often we find that when new owners come in making these decisions, they often want their own man in the job. And you only have to look at Chelsea to see that happening, that you have Thomas Tuchel, who was very, very successful at Chelsea, won the Champions League when probably he shouldn't have. But Todd Bowley comes in and immediately there are tensions there. In the first summer and eventually 3 months down the line, Thomas Tuchel gets sacked. Now, no one at Man United wants Erik ten Hag sacked, and Ratcliffe at the moment certainly doesn't. But what will be key when Ratcliffe comes in and Dave Brailsford comes in is a working relationship between those people, because Erik ten Hag has been used over the last 18 months to having a lot of power over recruitment, a lot of power at Old Trafford. Basically, he gets to do whatever he wants. If you've got another guy coming in saying, well, actually, we don't want you doing that, immediately then there's tension. So very, very quickly, Ratcliffe, Brailsford, Erik ten Hag, whoever comes in as sporting director, needs to find a really, really smooth working relationship as quickly as possible. That is going to be the key to almost everything in the short term for Ineos with Ratcliffe and Man United.